Hi, I'm George, Installation Technician with FrontRow. Thanks for joining me. Today we're going to walk through the steps for planning the installation of a classroom amplification system. This classroom will be using the FrontRow Lasso. Ideally, research was done before FrontRow systems were ordered to ensure that each classroom has the ideal setup. Our planning will focus on three main points: proper audio distribution, integration of other classroom technology with the receiver, and IR coverage of the room. Keeping these three items in mind, we want to evaluate the classroom for speaker and sensor requirements and optimal placement for this equipment. First, as we evaluate the classroom, consider the size and shape of the room. Is it a basic classroom or is it an odd-shaped room? And what color are the walls? And how many windows, or what's the area that those windows cover of the room? And then the next thing that we're going to want to take a look at is for obstructions in the room. This could be classroom art, drop lighting, overhead projectors, room dividers, or bookshelves. The other important consideration is where the teacher is positioned when speaking to the class. Now, let's take into account other classroom technology to be integrated with the system, like a TV, the teacher's computer, an overhead projector, or additional audio equipment like an iPod for podcasts, or a public address system. Now that we've evaluated the classroom, let's discuss where the equipment should be placed, starting with the receiver. The Lasso receiver excels at integrating various classroom technologies, so it's important to keep this in mind when choosing a location for the receiver. A corner like the one we see here is an ideal location. It's near the teacher's primary speaking area, and other classroom technologies nearby, like the teacher's computer and the AV center. The receiver could be placed on a shelf or in a cabinet, but for convenient access, we recommend using this FrontRow Lasso mounting tray. This tray mounts on the wall and swivels and tilts to the best position and then locks into place with this knob. Mounting at the teacher's eye level would be the ideal height. The receiver also comes with hardware for mounting in a rack. If you choose this option, make sure airflow is not restricted around the rack or cabinet. Be sure the receiver location you choose has a power outlet nearby and a space for the power supply and cord. A nearby shelf or floor can be used, just don't place it on top of the receiver. Now let's talk about speaker options and placement. The key to optimum speaker placement is ensuring the primary seating area is covered by sound. Imagine the speaker is like a flashlight and your goal is to light up the area where the students are sitting. So it's important to properly focus the speakers on this. Odd-sized or a large classroom may require additional speakers. The IR speaker here has 3 speakers and an IR sensor all integrated inside one unit, so only 2 IR speakers need to be installed in each classroom, yet it provides the sound coverage and clarity of a 4-speaker system. IR speakers should only be placed on the side walls. Do not install IR speakers on the front and back of the room, as this increases the chance of feedback, since that's where the teacher is normally speaking. Divide the area into 2 equal sections. This is where you'll want to aim the speakers, pointed slightly downward with the sound focused to the center of the seating area, like a flashlight lighting up the area. Plan for the IR speakers to be 3 to 6 feet offset from each other and equal distance from the center line of the room. Do not place them directly opposite of each other, and the speaker on the same side of the room as the receiver should be the furthest away from the receiver. Speakers should be mounted 7.5 to 10 feet from the floor and at least 5 inches down from the ceiling. Be aware of obstructions in the classroom. For example, notice this classroom here has drop lighting fixtures. In this case, we would install the IR speakers or IR wall sensors just below the bottom of the lights, so at least one sensor is visible at all times, no matter where the teacher is standing. Ceiling speakers are a nice flush mount speaker that evenly and clearly cover the classroom. They're a great alternative for a classroom that can't use a wall-mounted IR speaker because of aesthetic or architectural concerns. First, make sure the classroom has a drop ceiling, an acoustic tile type ceiling that will accommodate the speaker, like the one we have here. Next, we determine placement of the speakers by defining the area where the students will be seated. This student seating area is what you'll want to cover with the speakers, not the entire room. Now divide the student seating area into 4 equal sections and use a piece of tape to mark on the ceiling tile in the center of each of the 4 sections. These are the tiles where you'll want to mount the ceiling speakers. Avoid installing speakers directly in front of a whiteboard, as it increases the chances for feedback. Ceiling speakers will need a ceiling sensor or a pair of wall sensors in order to work with the Lasso receiver. Proper placement of these IR sensors is critical for optimal system performance. More sensors may be needed if the classroom does not have many reflective surfaces, if it is a large room or an odd-shaped room with dead zones such as an alcove. If wall sensors are used, they're usually installed in pairs. A couple of things to keep in mind. Windows separating adjacent classrooms may allow IR signals to escape, introducing interference or crosstalk in the adjoining room. And direct sunlight may also reduce system performance. For both these cases, some window coverings can be quite helpful. Let's bring up our classroom planning diagram again and look at the ceiling sensors. One or more ceiling sensors may be needed depending on size and shape of the classroom. If using one ceiling sensor, just locate the approximate center of the room. The ceiling sensor comes with instructions and hardware for mounting on suspended ceiling T-bar rails, mounting on sheetrock, or mounting directly on suspended ceiling tile. So using a piece of tape, mark the center of the room, and this is where the sensor will go. Make sure from this marked location, the sensor can see the entire room, and visibility isn't blocked by hanging projector mounts, drop lighting, hanging art, or other obstructions. If you can see the sensor from all parts of the room, then you've probably chosen a good spot. If you can't see the single ceiling sensor from all parts of the classroom that need coverage, or there are obstructions like a projector hanging from the ceiling, you may want to use 2 ceiling sensors. To locate positions for 2 ceiling sensors, divide the room from corner to corner. Then, locate the center of each half and mark each spot with tape. These are the mounting locations when using 2 ceiling sensors. Again, keep in mind the ceiling sensor comes with mounting hardware designed to conveniently clip onto the ceiling grid. If you could see at least one of these sensors at all times when moving around the room, you've probably chosen a good location. Wall sensors may be needed for an odd-shaped room, like a room with an alcove, or a room with drop lighting. Wall sensors are mounted using the same guidelines specified for mounting IR speakers that we discussed earlier. The next items to look at are the cable and wire for connecting sensors and speakers with the receiver. Ceiling and wall sensors use this IR cable specifically designed for IR sensors, and ceiling speakers are connected using speaker wire. IR speakers use this combo cable, which combines the sensor cable and the speaker wire into one cable. Most standard classroom configurations require only one ceiling sensor or 2 wall sensors. In this example, we have one ceiling sensor located in the center of the room. So the cable will be routed from this point, above the ceiling, over to the receiver location. And here's the path if wall sensors are used. It's basically the same placement we would use for the IR speakers. There are a few important details to note regarding IR cable length, since this is important for optimal system performance with the Lasso receiver. There is a limit to the length of a cable and a limit to the difference in the length between 2 cables. If the cable length must be adjusted, follow the specific details in the Lasso installation guide. Excess cable can also be coiled, tied, and placed safely in a plenum space, since it's UL listed. And finally, do not use a splitter with the IR cable. We'll need to route speaker wire. And to save a little time and speaker wire, we can hook up the 2 speakers on each side of the room in parallel. Hook up the front and rear speakers on the left side of the room. Then do the same for the front and rear speakers on the right side of the room. Then hook up only the front speaker on each side of the room to the receiver. Running individual speaker wire from each speaker to the receiver isn't necessary. Now let's look at the path for the combo cable, which is used to hook up the IR speakers. It's a little simpler since the IR cable and speaker wire are combined into one cable. Avoid routing it next to other cables or electrical systems, including fluorescent lighting ballasts. Route the cable away from other speaker wires as far as practical, leaving at least 6 inches of space around the cable if possible. An important feature of the Lasso receiver is the optional page override module, which installs to the back of the receiver. Sometimes there's a need to give audio priority over to public address announcements originating in the school office. This page override module mutes the volume of the Lasso receiver during a PA announcement. Once the announcement is over, the Lasso volume returns. A few things to keep in mind when planning for the page override is to make sure that the PA system is a 25, 70, or 100 volt system. And be sure to plan for enough speaker wire to run from the Lasso receiver to the PA speaker. This concludes our planning for a FrontRow Lasso system installation. The printed installation guide and our online site has additional details and recommendations for unique or challenging situations. And finally, please ensure the receiver is installed to comply with ADA standards.